By early May of 1945, the mighty war machine of the Third Reich was collapsing into a chaotic, fiery nightmare. Adolf Hitler was dead. Berlin was burning under a blanket of Soviet artillery dust, and across the shattered landscapes of Central Europe, scattered Nazi units were either fleeing in total disgrace or fighting with fanatical, suicidal desperation. Yet, high above the quiet, misty valleys of the Austrian Tyrol, perched atop a razor-sharp rocky cliff, stood Schloss Itter, a majestic, 13th-century medieval castle that looked like something pulled directly from a Gothic fairy tale. But beneath its picturesque stone towers and elegant iron gates lay a dark, sinister purpose. Since 1943, under the direct orders of Heinrich Himmler, this ancient fortress had been requisitioned by the SS and transformed into a high-security, luxury prison subcamp under the administration of the notorious Dachau concentration camp. It was designed to serve as an impenetrable gilded cage for Adolf Hitler's most valuable political hostages, the ruling elite of conquered France. Inside the cold, vaulted corridors of Castle Itter walked the former rulers of a fallen nation. Among them were two former prime ministers of France, Paul Reynaud and Édouard Daladier, bitter political rivals who deeply loathed each other, yet were forced to share the same stone walls. Walking alongside them were legendary French military commanders General Maurice Gamelin and General Maxime Weygand, who quietly blamed one another for the catastrophic collapse of France in 1940. The prison roster also held Marie-Agnes de Gaulle, the fiercely patriotic elder sister of Free French leader General Charles de Gaulle, as well as Jean Barotra, a world-famous international tennis champion known as one of the legendary Four Musketeers of the court. For years, these prominent figures had lived under the constant surveillance of heavily armed SS guards, isolated from the world, fully aware that they were being kept alive for a single, terrifying reason: to be used as ultimate bargaining chips by the Nazi leadership when the final reckoning arrived. On May 4th, 1945, as Allied forces closed in from all directions, the illusion of control shattered completely. Panic seized the castle's Nazi commander, SS Captain Sebastian Wimmer, along with his garrison of ruthless guards. Fearing swift retribution from advancing troops, Wimmer and his men packed their belongings, abandoned their posts, and fled into the surrounding pine forests under the cover of darkness, leaving behind a massive cache of weapons and a castle full of bewildered prisoners. But freedom was a deadly illusion. Roaming the surrounding Tyrolean hills was the fanatical 17th SS Panzergrenadier Division, a wave of die-hard, ruthless Nazi soldiers who refused to accept defeat. Driven by blind vengeance, the SS commanders learned of the abandoned high-value hostages and immediately dispatched over 100 heavily armed stormtroopers equipped with 20mm anti-aircraft cannons and heavy machine guns to retake the castle, massacre its prominent inmates, and turn the medieval fortress into a final, bloody last stand against the Allies. Trapped within the heavy stone walls with no military training and surrounded by an approaching tide of fanatical killers, the French elites realized they had only hours to live unless they summoned help. In a stroke of daring courage, Kroman Kukovic, a brave Yugoslavian handyman who worked in the castle, volunteered to slip through enemy lines. Mounting a rusted bicycle, Kukovic rode frantically down the treacherous mountain passes, dodging SS patrols in a desperate attempt to find any Allied unit. Meanwhile, inside the nearby Austrian town of Wergl, a highly unusual German officer named Major Josef Sepp, Gangl, was making a life-or-death choice. Gangl, a decorated, battle-hardened commander of the German Wehrmacht, had grown utterly disgusted by the atrocities of the Nazi regime. Abandoning his allegiance to the crumbling Reich, Gangl had secretly joined the local Austrian anti-Nazi resistance. When word reached him of the trapped civilians at Castle Itter, Gangl knew his small, exhausted squad of defecting German soldiers could not defeat the SS alone. Taking an incredible gamble, Major Gangl climbed into his military vehicle, hoisted a white flag of truce, and drove directly toward the advancing American front lines, seeking the help of his former mortal enemies to save innocent lives. Trapped within the heavy stone walls with no military training and surrounded by an approaching tide of fanatical killers, the French elites realized they had only hours to live unless they summoned help. In a stroke of daring courage, Kroman Kukovic, a brave Yugoslavian handyman who worked in the castle, volunteered to slip through enemy lines. Mounting a rusted bicycle, Kukovic rode frantically down the treacherous mountain passes, dodging SS patrols in a desperate attempt to find any Allied unit. Meanwhile, inside the nearby Austrian town of Wergl, a highly unusual German officer named Major Josef Sepp, Gangl, was making a life-or-death choice. Gangl, a decorated, battle-hardened commander of the German Wehrmacht, had grown utterly disgusted by the atrocities of the Nazi regime. Abandoning his allegiance to the crumbling Reich, Gangl had secretly joined the local Austrian anti-Nazi resistance. When word reached him of the trapped civilians at Castle Itter, Gangl knew his small, exhausted squad of defecting German soldiers could not defeat the SS alone. Taking an incredible gamble, Major Gangl climbed into his military vehicle, hoisted a white flag of truce, and drove directly toward the advancing American front lines, seeking the help of his former mortal enemies to save innocent lives. The tension inside the quiet room, where Captain Lee and Major Gangl sat, was suffocating, heavy with years of bloodshed and hatred. Lee looked deep into the eyes of the German officer, searching for any sign of betrayal or deception. But Gangl did not flinch. He explained that he had forsaken the murderous cause of the Third Reich, joined the local anti-Nazi resistance, and was willing to put his life on the line to protect innocent civilians from the cruelty of the SS. Recognizing the desperate urgency of the situation, Captain Lee made a historic, unprecedented decision. He agreed to forge an immediate, field-level alliance with the very soldiers his unit had been killing just days prior. Without waiting for official clearance from higher headquarters, which would have taken far too long and doomed to prisoners, Lee volunteered to lead a relief column to Castle Itter. The force Lee assembled was absurdly small, almost a suicidal gamble against the 100-plus SS troops surrounding the fortress. Captain Lee selected his favorite heavy Sherman tank, named Besotten Jenny, along with 14 brave American GIs from his battalion. They were joined by Major Gangl and 10 German Wehrmacht soldiers who tied white armbands around their field gray uniforms to prevent the Americans from accidentally shooting them in the heat of battle. To make the alliance even stranger, an officer of the Waffen-SS itself, Captain Kurt Siegfried Schrader, who had also turned against the regime, joined the ragtag force. As the strange convoy rolled out into the pouring rain, local Austrian villagers stared in absolute shock and disbelief at the sight. An American Sherman tank leading a truck packed with fully armed German and American soldiers, riding side by side toward a shared, deadly objective, navigating treacherous, ice-slicked mountain roads. The relief column had to cross a rickety wooden bridge that threatened to collapse under the heavy weight of the Sherman tank. Leaving part of his small force behind to secure the vital bridge, Captain Lee pushed forward with Besotten Jenny, his 14 GIs, and Gangl's German contingent. As night fell over the Tyrolean peaks, the heavy iron gates of Castle Itter swung open, and besotten Jenny rumbled into the ancient courtyard, blocking the main entrance like a steel dragon. The French dignitaries inside rushed down into the courtyard, expecting a massive American liberating army, only to stand in utter bewilderment as a lone American tank, 14 GIs, and a squad of German soldiers stepped out into the twilight. Captain Lee calmly lit a fresh cigar, surveyed the ancient stone ramparts, and realized that with the dark woods crawling with fanatical SS troops, this medieval fortress was about to become the stage for the most bizarre, violent siege of World War II. As night fell on May 4th, 1945, the atmosphere inside Schloss Itter was thick with dread. Captain Jack Lee immediately took charge of the castle's defenses, positioning his single Sherman tank, besotten Jenny, right at the main gate to block the primary entry point. He strategically assigned defense sectors along the ancient stone walls, pairing American GIs with German Wehrmacht soldiers who now wore white armbands to signify their allegiance to the resistance. Inside the grand halls, the French political prisoners were ordered to stay in the subterranean cellars for safety. However, men like former Prime Minister Paul Reynaud and tennis legend Jean Barotra refused to hide. Driven by pride and a burning desire to defeat their captors, they demanded weapons from the castle armory, picking up German K-98 rifles and MP-40 submachine guns to stand side by side with the men defending their lives. At dawn on May 5th, the peaceful mountain silence was shattered by a deafening barrage of artillery and heavy machine gun fire. Over 100 elite stormtroopers from the 17th SS Panzergrenadier Division unleashed a fierce, coordinated assault on Schloss Itter. A deadly 88mm anti-tank shell slammed directly into besotten Jenny, turning the proud American Sherman tank into a towering inferno of twisted metal and smoke. The driver managed to escape just seconds before the ammunition inside detonated. With their main armored shield destroyed, the defenders were forced back behind the thick medieval walls. Cannon fire pounded the stone parapets, sending fragments of ancient masonry raining down on the combined force of Americans, anti-Nazi Germans, and French statesmen who fired relentlessly back into the tree line. What followed was one of the most surreal firefights in military history. From the narrow medieval arrow slits and shattered stone windows, American GIs and German Wehrmacht infantrymen stood shoulder to shoulder, reloading each other's weapons and calling out targets in a frantic mix of English and German. French generals who had commanded massive armies years prior were now in the trenches, clearing jams on German rifles and taking aim at advancing SS infantry. Despite being heavily outnumbered and facing overwhelming firepower, the defenders held their ground with ferocious determination, knowing that surrender meant immediate execution at the hands of the vengeful SS. As the battle reached its terrifying climax, SS stormtroopers made a desperate push toward the castle walls under heavy cover fire. Seeing former French Prime Minister Paul Reynaud exposed in an open doorway, Major Josef Sepp, Gangl rushed out into the open to pull Reynaud out of the line of fire. In that split second of heroic sacrifice, an SS sniper's bullet struck Major Gangl, killing the German officer instantly. He died defending the life of a former enemy, becoming an eternal symbol of redemption in the war's final hours. With ammunition running dangerously low and the SS closing in from all sides, the defenders of Castle Itter were on the brink of being overrun, desperately praying for a miracle. By the afternoon of May 5th, 1945, the situation inside Schloss Itter had reached a catastrophic breaking point. Ammunition was down to its final rounds. Walls were crumbling under direct heavy machine gun fire, and the fanatical SS stormtroopers were preparing for their final, brutal breach. Knowing that the defenders could not survive another hour, Jean Barotra, the world-famous French tennis champion who had been imprisoned inside, volunteered for a daring, almost suicidal mission. Dressed in civilian clothes, Barotra leaped over the castle's high stone ramparts and sprinted straight through the dense alpine woods, dodging a hail of SS rifle bullets. Miraculously surviving the gauntlet, he breached enemy lines and encountered the forward reconnaissance elements of the American 142nd Infantry Regiment, providing them with the exact tactical coordinates of the embattled fortress. Guided by Barotra's intelligence, a massive American relief column of tanks and infantry armored vehicles roared up the winding mountain roads toward Itter. In the absolute nick of time, as SS forces were charging the inner iron gates, the overwhelming firepower of the American military descended upon the attackers. Heavy machine guns and artillery shells shredded the SS positions, forcing the remaining stormtroopers to shatter, surrender, or flee into the deep forest. The siege was broken. Enemies who had spent 6 long years fighting across Europe stood together in the battered courtyard, exhausted, bloody, but alive. The strange, miraculous battle was over, ending just 3 days before the official unconditional surrender of Nazi Germany. This extraordinary clash forced the world to confront a profound moral question that would echo through history. Just months later, during the historic Nuremberg Trials, high-ranking Nazi officials and soldiers routinely offered the same haunting defense for their unspeakable atrocities. They claimed they were simply following orders, obeying the strict legal codes of their state, and fulfilling their duty under the cold doctrine of legal positivism, a concept famously debated by legal theorists like Hans Kelsen. To those men, the law was absolute, regardless of its cruelty, and compliance was the ultimate duty. Yet, on that fateful day at Castle Itter, men like Major Josef Gangl and Captain Jack Lee proved that true human morality supersedes any unjust law or military order. They possessed the rare, dangerous courage to listen to their own conscience rather than blindly serving a corrupt system. The heroics at Castle Itter leave us with an unsettling, timeless reflection on human nature and moral responsibility. It forces us to look into the mirror of our modern world and ask ourselves uncomfortable truths. If placed in the same terrifying circumstances, would today's soldiers and citizens possess the immense courage to disobey evil orders and stand up for humanity? Or have we grown too comfortable, too passive, and just as vulnerable to falling into the trap of collective blindness and blind obedience once again? What do you think? Would the men and women of today have the courage to defy authority to save their fellow man? Share your thoughts and join the debate in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to Echoes of the Past for more untold chapters of history.